Welcome to our channel. Are you ready to embark on thrilling adventures across the cosmos, encounter mysterious alien civilizations, and explore the unknown depths of space? If so, you've come to the right place. Subscribe and join our community of fellow sci-fi enthusiasts who love diving into epic tales and futuristic explorations. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an exciting new story. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment below sharing your favorite sci-fi moment, or let us know what kind of adventures you'd like to see next. Your feedback helps us create the stories you crave. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to journey beyond the stars as we begin our latest saga.
We are Maiden and the Mercenary, an alien-human partnership that shakes the galaxy. In the dark, neon-lit depths of an alien underworld, where the rules of the galaxy are bent and broken, one man's thirst for a drink becomes the catalyst for a wild, life-altering adventure. Dorian, a battle-hardened mercenary, slumps onto a bar stool, his body bruised and battered from his latest failed mission. His eyes scan the holographic menu of a hidden bar tucked away in the far reaches of space. He's here for one reason only: to drown his frustration in something strong, something he's never tasted before. Then he sees it. A drink unlike any other, shimmering with an almost supernatural glow, celestial nectar, the most expensive item on the menu. He taps it with a determined sigh. After everything he's been through, he deserves a treat. But when the bartender, a six-armed alien, makes a cryptic remark, Dorian's curiosity is piqued. And that's when she appears, a figure unlike any other. Her pale blue skin seems to glow, her silvery hair cascading like liquid light, and her eyes, those eyes hold a mystery he can't quite decipher. This woman, with an air of playful danger, offers him the drink in the most unexpected way, leaving him in a stunned silence. What starts as a simple order for a drink turns into a wild encounter that will lead Dorian into the heart of an intergalactic conspiracy. Her name is Vera, and the story that unfolds from that moment will challenge everything he knows about trust, survival, and love. As they embark on a dangerous journey to take down the corrupt dominion that hunts her kind, Dorian realizes that sometimes the smallest choices, like ordering a drink, can change the course of your life forever. Dorian's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the celestial nectar, his mind still reeling from the events of his last failed mission. His body ached, but he didn't care. The holographic lights above the bar flickered as the bartender, an alien with 6 long, thin arms, chirped something under his breath. "A brave choice, human," the bartender said with a gleam in his translucent eyes, "or a foolish one." He set the glowing blue drink in front of Dorian with a flourish. Dorian narrowed his eyes, irritated yet curious. "Just give me the drink," he muttered, already tired of the banter. The wounds from his failed mission still burned, but the last thing he needed right now was someone questioning his choices. Before the bartender could respond, a smooth, melodic voice spoke from behind him. "That's not how it works." Dorian froze, his pulse quickening for reasons he couldn't quite place. He turned slowly, his gaze falling on the woman who had spoken. She was unlike anyone he'd ever seen. Her skin, an ethereal shade of pale blue, shimmered under the dim lights, and her silvery hair cascaded past her shoulders in a fluid movement that seemed almost otherworldly. Her eyes, an icy light blue, studied him with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "I beg your pardon?" Dorian's voice was sharp, but his words faltered when their eyes met. The woman smiled, her lips curving up into a playful grin. "The drink, human," she said, leaning closer. "It's different." Before Dorian could respond, she hopped up onto the counter with a surprising agility. Her flowing black corset and metallic accents caught the dim light, and she moved with an elegance that made him momentarily forget his frustration. His eyes followed her every movement as she crouched above the empty glass he had been about to drink from. The celestial nectar was about to become something entirely unexpected. Dorian watched in disbelief as she made the most bizarre motion. A faint glow started to emanate from beneath her skirt, the glass slowly filling with a luminous blue liquid that seemed to pulse with its own energy. He blinked, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "What the hell?" Dorian's voice trailed off as he stumbled back, nearly toppling off the stool. His mind raced with confusion, irritation, and something else, something that felt both intriguing and dangerous. She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes, soft and musical. My species has certain biological abilities. Combined with our specialized diet, we produce the celestial nectar. She slid gracefully off the counter, her movements fluid like water, and landed beside him. It's quite rare, you know, and as you can see, very valuable. Dorian stared at the drink, his thoughts a whirlwind. His pride stung from her obvious amusement, but curiosity won out. You're telling me that this whole drink, it costs 300 credits because of that? He gestured vaguely to the glowing liquid in the glass, still processing the bizarre situation. The woman smiled again, her eyes glimmering with a secret knowledge. Exactly, but if you don't enjoy it, I'll offer you a full refund. Dorian shook his head in disbelief, but reached for the drink anyway. If nothing else, it would make for an interesting story later. With a defiant tilt of his chin, he tipped the glass back in one swift motion. The taste hit him like a supernova. Sweet, tangy, and with hints of exotic spices he couldn't name. It sent a rush of electric tingles through his body, leaving him feeling more alive than he had in years. His breath hitched, the warmth of the drink spreading through him in waves. Holy hell, he breathed, setting the glass down with a sharp exhale. The woman beside him, who had introduced herself as Vera, grinned widely. Most humans have that reaction, though very few are bold enough to down it in one go. I'm not most humans, Dorian said, his voice steady despite the rush of energy coursing through him. But you still haven't told me what exactly your species is. Vera leaned closer, the playful look in her eyes never fading. I'll tell you, if you're interested. She traced a finger lazily along the edge of her glass, her skin glowing ever so slightly. But first, tell me, Mercenary, what's troubling you? The question caught Dorian off guard. He had thought he could keep his troubles to himself, but there was something about Vera's presence, something in the way she looked at him, as though she could see through every armor, every facade he'd built over the years. He exhaled, the weight of his failure creeping back into his mind. Mission went sideways, lost some good people, he said quietly, the words leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. It's hard, you know? Vera's expression softened, though her eyes never lost their mischievous glint. You're here now, she said, her voice a calming melody. And if you stay long enough, you might just find something worth fighting for again. Dorian looked at her, surprised by the sudden depth of her words. He had expected sarcasm, or at the very least more playful teasing. But there was sincerity there too, something real. The two of them settled into a comfortable silence, the atmosphere in the bar changing as the hours passed. Laughter and conversation surrounded them, but all Dorian could focus on was Vera. Her intelligence, her strength, her ability to keep up with him, both mentally and physically. It was unlike anything he had experienced before. As the night wore on, he found himself genuinely enjoying her company, the bitterness of his failed mission fading with each word they exchanged. By the time the bar began to empty, Dorian felt lighter. Even his aching body seemed to have found some peace, some semblance of calm. Well, I can't say I've ever met anyone quite like you, Dorian remarked with a wry smile as he stood to leave. Vera's eyes sparkled. Same time tomorrow? She asked with a raised brow. He grinned, feeling something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Wouldn't miss it. What neither of them could have known was that the next time they met, their worlds would be turned upside down. The encounter would set them on a path of danger, intrigue, and a connection neither could have anticipated. And it all started with one drink. The bar was quieter now, the night beginning to fade into the early hours of the morning. Dorian had gotten to know Vera better in their brief time together, but the tension in the air was palpable. The atmosphere of the bar, filled with alien laughter and the hum of quiet conversation, seemed distant, as if the world around them had suddenly become irrelevant. Just as Dorian was about to say his goodbyes, the door to the bar slammed open with a force that shook the walls. A trio of rough-looking individuals entered, their eyes scanning the room with predatory intent. Two of them were Draxi, an insectoid species known for their thick armored skin, and the third, a towering figure with dark cybernetic implants and a cold, menacing stare, was a Zoran. Dorian instinctively tensed, his hand brushing the grip of his sidearm, but Vera's voice cut through the rising tension. They're here. Dorian's pulse quickened as he looked at her. Her face, usually so calm and composed, now held a flicker of fear. But it was the cold, determined way she held herself that made his stomach twist with both concern and admiration. "Friends of yours?" Dorian asked, his voice low but steady. "Hunters," Vera replied with a grimace, her eyes narrowing. "They've been tracking my people for years." She paused, taking a deep breath. "They want what I can produce. My species' abilities make us valuable commodities in certain markets." Dorian understood immediately. The bounty hunters were after her bloodline, her people. He didn't need to hear more. The Zoran, who had been eyeing Vera the entire time, sneered as he stepped forward. "There she is," he growled, his mechanical eye flicking towards her with a menacing glow. "The Blue Maiden. You'll come with us, whether you want to or not." Vera stiffened, but Dorian was already moving. He didn't even have to think. He rose from his seat, his battle-scarred body bracing itself as his instincts kicked in. He could see the way the Draxi were positioning themselves, their claws twitching, ready for a fight. "Stay behind me," Dorian murmured, his voice a command, even though Vera had already proven herself more than capable of defending herself. "I can handle myself," Vera replied, but her eyes flicked towards him, a silent plea in their depths. Without another word, she shifted her weight, preparing for what was to come. The Zoran grinned, his confidence palpable. "That's what they all say." He reached for the weapon at his side, his hand moving with practiced precision. Before he could draw his blaster, Dorian was already in motion. The laser pistol he carried was an extension of himself, quick and deadly. In the blink of an eye, he had drawn it, aiming it at the first Draxi and firing. The shot hit its target with pinpoint accuracy, sending the creature crashing to the floor with a screech. The bar erupted into chaos. Patrons scrambled, diving under tables, ducking behind pillars. The Zoran, now enraged, lunged at Dorian with a vicious swipe, his mechanical arm transforming into a blade, glowing with a deadly energy. But Dorian was faster. Using the enhanced strength of his powered armor, he ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the blade as it whizzed past him. He used the momentum to flip a nearby table, sending it sliding in the path of the second Draxi. The alien stumbled backward, giving Dorian the precious seconds he needed to reposition. But then, something unexpected happened. Vera, who had remained on the sideline until now, sprang into action. She moved like liquid mercury, her body flowing effortlessly around the Zoran's strikes. With a sudden movement, she produced a small device from the folds of her corset, pressing it against the Zoran's neck. Blue energy crackled, and the towering hunter dropped to the ground like a lifeless doll. Dorian stared, momentarily stunned. Vera wasn't just quick, she was deadly. The remaining Draxi, seeing their comrades fall, hesitated for a split second before retreating toward the exit. But Dorian wasn't about to let them get away that easily. His laser pistol came up again, and the remaining hunter dropped to the floor with a precise shot to the chest. "That was interesting," Dorian said with a slow, amused grin, holstering his weapon. He turned to Vera, who was catching her breath, her eyes alight with the adrenaline of the fight. Vera laughed softly, her expression flushed with excitement. "I could have handled it alone, you know," she teased, though her tone was warm with gratitude. Dorian smiled back. "Maybe, but I wanted to see how you fight." He didn't mention that her skills had stunned him. He was a mercenary, used to seeing the deadliest people in the galaxy at work, but what she had just done was beyond impressive. Vera's expression softened. "You didn't have to intervene," she said quietly, the adrenaline slowly fading as the danger passed. "But I'm glad you did." Dorian nodded, his thoughts swirling. He hadn't expected to be so captivated by her. Her strength, her intelligence, her unflinching courage, it was everything he respected. And now, in the midst of battle, something inside him had shifted. Vera stood up, brushing off her clothes. The playful look in her eyes was back. "But now you owe me an explanation." "An explanation for what?" Dorian asked, raising an eyebrow. "For jumping into a fight with bounty hunters for a stranger," Vera said with a grin, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "And for not running when I showed you what I could do." Dorian chuckled, shaking his head. "Best decision I ever made." The sound of the bar's door slamming shut echoed in the stillness that followed their confrontation. Dorian and Vera exchanged glances, the weight of their narrow escape hanging in the air between them. The remaining patrons, once hiding under tables and in corners, began to return to their seats, murmuring among themselves. But the two of them were far from done. The bar's atmosphere was now thick with a mixture of relief and tension. Dorian took a seat at the nearest table, his hand still resting lightly on his weapon. The adrenaline had started to wear off, but the focus he felt was sharper than ever. Vera, however, looked completely unfazed, as though the chaos from a moment ago hadn't fazed her in the least. "You seem to know those hunters well," Dorian remarked as she slid into the seat across from him, her movements fluid and graceful as ever. Vera's eyes narrowed, and she glanced down at her drink. "They've been after me and my people for years. The Dominion has resources far beyond what most could imagine, and they've turned my kind into commodities." She paused, taking a slow, measured breath. "But I'm not just running from them anymore, Dorian. I'm going to stop them." Dorian leaned forward, intrigued. "Stop them? How?" Vera's eyes flicked to his, a spark of determination igniting within them. "I've got a plan," she said simply. "But to pull it off, we need something bigger than just me running and hiding. We need to expose them, to bring everything to light." She stood up, moving towards the bar counter and pulling out a small holographic device from her belt. She activated it, and a map of the Dominion's operations appeared above the table, shimmering in the dim light. Dorian studied the map, recognizing the layout of several systems he'd crossed paths with in the past. But there was one facility that stood out among them: Artemis Station, a heavily fortified outpost, known for its military-grade security and scientific research. The facility's outer perimeter was surrounded by defenses so tight that even the most skilled mercenaries avoided it. It was a place not even the bravest dared infiltrate. Vera tapped the hologram, zooming in on a specific location within the station. "This is the Dominion's primary data vault," she said, her voice steady. "It holds the research files on the experiments they've conducted on my species, the failed attempts to replicate our abilities, their plans for genetic manipulation, everything." Dorian raised an eyebrow. "And you think we can just waltz in there and grab everything?" Vera's lips curled into a smile, though there was little humor in it. "If you're with me, yes. I've been gathering intel for months. We know the guard rotations, the security vulnerabilities, but we'll need to act quickly and be precise. The Dominion is known for covering their tracks, and they're not shy about eliminating anyone who stands in their way." Dorian was silent for a moment, processing everything. He had faced impossible odds before. He was no stranger to danger. But this was something else entirely. It was a challenge unlike any he had faced. "All right," he said, meeting her gaze with resolve. "I'm in. What's the next step?" Vera's smile widened, and for the first time, Dorian saw a flicker of warmth in her eyes. "We get to work." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Dorian and Vera worked tirelessly to gather everything they would need for the heist. While Dorian checked his weapons, ensuring that his powered armor was fully functional and his laser pistols were loaded, Vera remained focused on their most crucial task: gathering the necessary data to break into Artemis Station's heavily guarded vault. They spent hours poring over stolen blueprints and intelligence reports. The research files they had taken from the Dominion facility earlier had been invaluable, revealing security protocols, guard shift patterns, and weaknesses in the station's defensive systems. The most surprising revelation was that the station's biometric lock system was specifically designed to detect the unique biological signatures of Vera's people. The Dominion believed they had a fail-safe against any potential intruders, but what they didn't know was that Vera could bypass their system using her own genetic signature. "It's almost too easy," Vera mused as she studied the data. "They've put so much faith in their technology that they never considered the possibility that someone like me could slip right under their radar." Dorian gave her a sidelong glance, impressed by her thoroughness. "You've really thought this through." "Of course," Vera replied, her tone confident. "I've been planning this for a long time, and once we get in, once we have that data, we'll have everything we need to bring down the Dominion. This won't just stop the hunting. It'll expose them for who they really are." Dorian nodded, his mind whirling with the scope of what they were about to undertake. "And what happens after we succeed?" Vera's eyes softened for a moment, the fierce determination replaced by something more vulnerable. After we succeed, I don't know, she said quietly. But I do know that I'm tired of hiding, and I'm tired of watching my people suffer. Her words hit Dorian harder than he expected. He had heard stories of oppression, of entire species being exploited for profit and power. But hearing it from her, seeing the fire in her eyes, it felt more personal. He wasn't just helping her fight the Dominion. He was fighting for something much larger, something that, in his heart, he knew he had to stand behind. I'll be right there with you, Dorian said, his voice steady. We're in this together. Vera's lips twitched into a smile. We make a good team, she said softly before turning back to the holographic display. Let's get this done. As the day of their heist approached, the tension between Dorian and Vera grew palpable. Every moment felt like a countdown, the weight of their mission bearing down on them. The plan was simple. Infiltrate Artemis Station, bypass the biometric locks, steal the data, and escape undetected. But with the Dominion's extensive security systems, every step they took brought them closer to the unknown. Ready? Vera asked, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of excitement. Dorian nodded, adjusting his battle suit one last time. Always. With that, they boarded their ship, Nebula Fury, and set a course for Artemis Station. The countdown had begun. The Nebula Fury cut through the inky blackness of space, its engines humming softly as the ship navigated toward Artemis Station. Dorian sat in the cockpit, his fingers flying over the control panels, checking their approach one last time. Vera stood behind him, her eyes scanning the data on her portable device. She had remained calm throughout the entire journey, but Dorian could feel the palpable tension between them. Both of them knew that this mission was unlike anything they'd ever faced before. They had to succeed, no matter the cost. Approaching Artemis Station in 5 minutes, Dorian announced, his voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. Vera's eyes narrowed, and she glanced at him. I'll be ready, you? He gave her a brief smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I've been ready for a long time. The station loomed ahead, a massive spire of metal and glass, surrounded by an intricate network of defense satellites and laser grids. It was everything Dorian had expected, highly fortified and nearly impenetrable. But Vera had a way in. The biometric locks would be her key to their success. As the Nebula Fury approached the docking bay, Dorian activated the ship's cloaking system, ensuring they wouldn't be detected by the station's external sensors. The stealth technology had been a last-minute upgrade, something Dorian had won in a high-stakes game of chance with an old acquaintance. It was risky, but without it, they would have been detected long before reaching the station. Docking in 3 minutes, Dorian said, his eyes flicking to Vera. Once we're in, we split up. You handle the biometric access, and I'll make sure the data's secure. Vera nodded, her expression focused. We'll need to move fast. The data vault is heavily protected, and once the alarm goes off, we're on the clock. Dorian could feel his heart pounding in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was adrenaline. They had no room for error, but something about working with Vera, her confidence, her determination, gave him a sense of calm. For the first time in years, he wasn't just fighting for money or survival. He was fighting for something bigger, for freedom. The Nebula Fury docked smoothly in one of the less frequented maintenance bays. The cloaking system had worked, and the station hadn't detected them. Vera was already up, her movements quick and quiet, as she donned a black stealth suit that shimmered faintly in the low light. The suit was designed to blend into any environment, and it had been custom-made for her. Let's go, Vera said, her voice low but full of determination. They moved quickly, passing through the station's maze of corridors, their footsteps soundless. The halls were dimly lit, and the occasional flicker of overhead lights cast long shadows across the cold metal floors. Dorian kept his hand on his weapon, his senses heightened, watching for any signs of movement. He knew that the real danger wouldn't come from the station's security guards. It would come from the hidden dangers inside the Dominion's dark secrets. The data vault was located on the lower levels of Artemis Station, deep beneath the research complex. The deeper they went, the more guarded the facility became. Dorian and Vera's path took them through several secure checkpoints, But thanks to Vera's quick thinking and her knowledge of the station's layout, they were able to bypass each one without detection. Dorian couldn't help but admire her. She was a force to be reckoned with, intelligent, resourceful, and unshakable. Finally, they reached the vault's entrance. The room was heavily guarded, but it had one glaring weakness: its reliance on biometric security. The vault's access required a scan of unique biological signatures, and Vera's species provided just the right one. Vera stepped forward, her expression resolute. "This is it," she said quietly. "Stay close." She approached the biometric scanner, her eyes focusing on the glowing panel beside the vault door. She placed her palm on the scanner, and a soft hum filled the air. The light above the scanner blinked green, and the heavy door slid open with a hiss. Dorian's breath caught in his chest as the vault revealed its contents: a series of sleek, high-tech data cores lined up neatly in rows. Each one contained a piece of the Dominion's twisted research, detailing everything from the genetic manipulation of Vera's species to classified military projects and illegal experiments. This was it. This was the information they needed to bring the Dominion down. But as Vera stepped inside, her eyes narrowed at one particular terminal that was illuminated in bright red. "That's strange," she muttered, moving towards it. "This terminal is locked out. It shouldn't be." Dorian followed her, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. "What do you mean? Are we still good?" Vera looked back at him, her brow furrowed. "We're good, but something's off. The information is here, but there's a block in the system. It's almost like they're trying to hide something else, something bigger." Before Dorian could respond, a loud alarm blared throughout the station, drowning out the hum of the terminal. "Damn it," Dorian muttered, his hand flying to his weapon. "They found us." The vault door slammed shut with a resounding thud, and the emergency lights flickered on. Red sirens blared through the corridors. Dorian cursed under his breath. They were on the clock now. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the entire station was alerted to their presence. "Vera!" Dorian shouted. "We need to move now!" Vera's hands flew over the terminal, and for a moment, Dorian could see the familiar concentration in her eyes. She was working fast, scanning through encrypted files, her fingers moving in a blur as she bypassed security measures. Dorian's heart was racing as he checked the hallway, preparing for the worst. "I've got it!" Vera exclaimed. "We've got everything, but there's something else here, something that wasn't supposed to be part of this data." She turned the terminal towards him, revealing the decrypted files. Dorian's eyes narrowed as he scanned the screen. "This isn't just about your people, is it?" He said quietly. "No," Vera replied, her voice tense. "It's about us all." The files revealed plans for a new weapon, one that could wipe out entire planets, using a process that could harvest the biological traits of any species to create devastating biological warfare. The Dominion's plans were even darker than they had imagined. "This is bigger than we thought," Dorian murmured, his jaw clenched. "We need to get out of here, now." Vera nodded, her face pale but determined. "Let's finish this." The alarm blared louder now, the shrill sound of urgency reverberating through the sterile corridors of Artemis Station. Dorian's heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed Vera's arm, pulling her toward the nearest escape route. "Time's up," he muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the walls for any signs of approaching guards. The data they had just uncovered was enough to change the course of the galaxy, but it had come at a price. The Dominion knew they were there now, and they would stop at nothing to capture or kill them. Vera's fingers were still flying across the terminal, gathering every last bit of data she could. The file containing the weapon plans was now saved to her device, but there was one final thing, one piece of information that had been buried deeper than the rest. "Vera!" Dorian barked, grabbing her by the wrist. "We have to go now!" She looked up at him, her eyes still reflecting that unshakable determination, but this time there was something else, something darker. She hesitated for a split second, her fingers lingering on the console as the screen displayed one last set of coordinates. It was a location, one that Dorian had never seen before, buried beneath layers of encrypted data. "I can't just leave it," she whispered, her voice tense. This could change everything." Dorian clenched his jaw. "You can't save it all. We're dead if we don't leave now." Vera turned away from the screen, her face hardening. "You're right," she said, her voice cold. "We've got what we came for. Let's go." But just as they made their move toward the exit, a heavy metallic thud echoed through the hallway. The sound of boots, hundreds of them, was closing in, and it was clear that their brief moment of stealth was over. "Move!" Dorian shouted, drawing his sidearm and taking a defensive stance. "We don't have time for this." Vera was already 2 steps ahead, darting through the corridor with her heightened agility. She was like a ghost, slipping past the guards who appeared at the end of the hallway, her form blending seamlessly into the shadows. Dorian followed close behind, using his enhanced strength to shove aside anything in their path. They reached the maintenance hatch, their way out. But as Vera yanked it open, they were met with a horrifying sight: a squad of elite Dominion soldiers, their weapons aimed directly at them. The odds were too high. They had no choice but to fight their way out. Dorian's heart skipped a beat. No time for subtlety then. In one fluid motion, he dropped to a crouch and opened fire, the sound of his blaster cutting through the air. Vera's body followed with a deadly grace, her movements quick and precise as she launched a series of explosive charges toward their attackers. The blast sent a ripple of shockwaves through the station, and the soldiers scattered for cover. But they were no match for the combined skills of Dorian and Vera. Dorian used his armor's enhanced strength to send the enemy flying with powerful punches, while Vera's speed and deadly precision took down the remaining soldiers one by one. They continued their sprint down the corridor, each step echoing with the knowledge that the time they had was running out. "Vera, we've got to make it to the docking bay," Dorian shouted, pulling her forward as the walls shook with the weight of the Dominion's retaliation. Vera nodded, her focus unwavering. Almost there. The sound of pursuit was growing louder, but they didn't stop. They burst through the door leading to the docking bay, where Nebula Fury awaited them, silent and sleek, ready to take them to safety. But just as they reached the ship, they were met with an unexpected barrier. A familiar face appeared at the entrance to the bay, its cold, cybernetic eye glinting with malicious intent. It was Zoran, the very same hunter who had been after Vera since the beginning. "Well, well," Zoran sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "It seems the Blue Maiden has made some friends." Vera's eyes blazed with fury as she stepped forward, her hand moving toward her hidden blade. "You won't get away with this," she growled, her voice low but full of promise. Zoran's grin widened. "I'm afraid you've underestimated us, Blue Maiden. The Dominion never forgets." Without warning, Zoran lunged, his cybernetic arm transforming into a massive blade. But before he could reach them, Dorian was already moving, firing his blaster directly at Zoran's mechanical eye. The shot hit with pinpoint accuracy, and the massive creature faltered, stumbling back in pain. "Not today," Dorian muttered, turning back to Vera. "Get to the ship now." She hesitated, her eyes locking with his. In that moment, Dorian saw the gratitude and the unspoken bond between them, something stronger than either had expected. But there was no time for words. Vera nodded, her lips curling into a brief smile as she sprinted toward Nebula Fury. Dorian followed close behind, just as the first reinforcements arrived, guns blazing. They were almost there. They could see the ship in front of them, the promise of safety and freedom within reach. Then, with a deafening roar, the docking bay doors slammed shut. "Damn it!" Dorian cursed, spinning around. "We're not leaving without that ship." Vera's voice rang out from behind him, filled with determination. "We don't need the door. We have each other." With a single motion, she activated a hidden switch on the side of the bay, and the walls around them shifted. The bay doors didn't need to open. They were already sealed in. They would have to make their escape through the maintenance tunnels, a path Dorian knew well. He had used it in the past for quick getaways, and it was the only way to reach their ship without being detected. "Follow me," Dorian said, grabbing Vera's hand. They sprinted through the narrow corridors, their footsteps the only sound echoing through the metal tunnels. Behind them, the station erupted in chaos, alarms blaring as the Dominion's forces scrambled to stop them. But Dorian and Vera were already out of their reach. By the time they reached the docking bay, Nebula Fury was ready to go, its engines humming in anticipation. With a final glance at the chaos they had left behind, Dorian activated the ship's thrusters, sending them blasting through the station's outer atmosphere. As they broke free into open space, Vera let out a small, triumphant laugh. "We did it," she breathed, her eyes glowing with exhilaration. "We actually did it." Dorian glanced over at her, a grin tugging at the corner of his lips. "We're not done yet. We still have to take down the Dominion." But in that moment, as the stars of deep space stretched out before them, Dorian knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, he wasn't alone. They had a future to fight for, a future that started with this moment and the connection they had forged in the heat of battle. "We'll do it together," he said quietly, as the Nebula Fury soared into the unknown. The Nebula Fury sailed silently through the endless expanse of space, its engines barely a whisper against the dark void. Dorian and Vera sat side by side in the cockpit, the stars stretching out before them like an ocean of possibility. Their escape from Artemis Station had been narrow, the weight of the Dominion's looming threat still heavy in the air. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Dorian felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Vera leaned back in her seat, her fingers tracing the edge of the control panel, her glowing skin casting a soft light in the dim cabin. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, but Dorian could see the deep concentration there. She was already thinking ahead, calculating their next steps. "What's next?" Dorian asked, breaking the silence. Vera turned toward him, her lips curving into a half smile, one full of unspoken secrets. "We've only just begun, Dorian." The data they had stolen was powerful, revealing not only the Dominion's dark plans for biological warfare, but also uncovering a vast network of corrupted leaders, allies, and secrets that spanned across the galaxy. But they both knew that what they had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. Dorian leaned back in his seat, his hands folded across his chest. "How long before the Dominion finds us?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Vera paused, her eyes briefly flashing with a spark of uncertainty. "The Dominion has resources that extend beyond anything we can imagine. They'll be after us, sure, but they don't know everything we've taken yet, and they don't know where we're going." Dorian raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And where are we going?" Vera's lips parted, but before she could answer, the ship's comm system crackled to life, a deep, static-laden voice breaking the silence. "This is Ryder Stone," the voice growled. "I have the information you need, but you won't be the only ones looking for it." Dorian's heart skipped a beat. Ryder Stone, the notorious smuggler, a man with connections to nearly every underworld network in the galaxy. He was dangerous, and his alliances were just as unpredictable as the shadows he operated from. "Why does that name sound familiar?" Dorian muttered to himself. Vera's expression shifted from calm to wary, and she glanced at Dorian, her voice barely a whisper. "Because he's the last person anyone wants to owe a favor to." Another crackle from the comms filled the room, followed by a series of coordinates flashing across the screen. Vera's eyes locked on them, her fingers moving quickly to input them into the navigation system. "Those coordinates. They're taking us to the outer rim," Vera said, her voice low, "where no one else dares go. It's the perfect place to lay low, but also a place where the most dangerous people in the galaxy hide." Dorian felt a chill run down his spine. "You're not saying we're meeting him, are we?" "We don't have a choice," Vera replied, her voice steady but with an edge of finality. "He's the only one who can help us break into the Dominion's deepest archives, the ones we weren't able to access. If we're going to bring them down, we need his help." Dorian thought about it for a moment. They had no shortage of enemies. The Dominion was hunting them. Bounty hunters were after Vera, and now they were about to make a deal with Ryder Stone, someone whose loyalty could turn as quickly as the tides of war. "Then let's get this over with," Dorian said, his tone resolute. "The sooner we meet him, the sooner we can take the next step in ending the Dominion's grip on the galaxy." As the ship's engines hummed, Vera's gaze shifted to the viewport, her eyes scanning the infinite stars. "But be careful, Dorian," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "because once we step into Ryder's world, there's no turning back." And with that, the Nebula Fury adjusted course, the coordinates flashing before them, leading them to the unknown. As the ship flew toward the coordinates, the tension between Dorian and Vera remained palpable, but so did the unspoken understanding that this was only the beginning. A dangerous journey lay ahead, and each step would bring them closer to a galaxy-shaking confrontation. But they were no longer alone. Together, they would face whatever came next. And as the stars beckoned them forward into the deep, endless reaches of the galaxy, neither of them could shake the feeling that their greatest battles and their most profound revelations were still to come.